With this, with the Lenacapavir, I hope for that in the next 3-4 years, the HIV infections per day, you mentioned 100, have gone down drastically.
We should see a lot of progress. What I said is, if we have access, the limiting factor, which we hope will not happen, is access. We're assured. I was in a meeting recently, early this year, with the manufacturers and the CEO of Gilead Sciences. In that meeting, he asked him the question of access, and he assured us that they are going to ensure that there's enough supply for resource-limited settings for people to protect themselves using Lenacapavir. We don't want to go back to, because the way the infection that one time had come up had increased. We're going to go back to when I was in internship, what I did mention. I did my internship from Mulago, the first half, and then the last half in Masaka. In Mulago, I worked on Ward 4th floor, Ward 4BC, and you would admit patients in the night, and then they are supposed to do a ward round in the morning. And by the time you go to the ward round with a consultant, there are piles of files for you to write death certificates. So if you ever had like an emergency, if for people not to look for you, because if you disappeared like 1 hour in the morning, you would have people looking for you because they want to take their bodies. So you need to sign off death certificates. And these were not like 5 or 10, like 100 people have died in the night because of cryptococcal meningitis, because of TB, because of different PCP, that pneumonia that kills people with HIV. So that picture was sort of traumatizing for us. So when we think about the impact of HIV, and now we see this breakthrough with Lenacapavir, we'll really push for access so that we have the infections go down and don't go back to that time of the early 2000s and the 90s. Yeah. So we have activists, we have community people whose role, civil society, whose role is to make sure that people access this drug. As researchers, we can do the studies, and then we have findings, we hand them over to ministry will pass policies and implement. But then we have people who stand to benefit and represent the community. Yeah, that was now whom we want to push and make sure that there's no shortage of drug in the country and all over the world. They have their groups, and we are relying on those voices because they are the voices for the people to make sure that Lenacapavir does not run out.
There is a strong movement of activism across the world, and that movement has done an incredible job.
Yes.
For the first step, and we hope it will deliver.
And by the way, don't undermine the community. For Purpose 1, unlike other studies, we're the first study to allow pregnant women to continue on study product when they're in the study. Because this is how we used to do the studies. We're like, because they are vulnerable, when somebody gets pregnant in the study, you stop the product, you discontinue them from taking the product because you don't know the effects on the babies. These people came up, the community activists, and they said, but why are you excluding pregnant women from being in these research studies? They should be protected through research and not from research. So Gilead took a bold step, approached the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and then they included in the design that when someone gets pregnant, unlike all other studies, or someone is breastfeeding, let them continue on that drug so that by the time we have results, they're also able to know that this drug works for pregnant women. Because for all other studies, what we'll do is after now, Purpose has ended. Okay, it hasn't ended, but after getting the results, we would now design another study for people who are pregnant and then test if this drug is safe for pregnant women, will it work for pregnant women. Now we would not have pregnant women in the guidelines. They'll be waiting for their results until we finish another study, which takes years and years. So activists were like, no, let's have pregnant women also be part of the study. Let them continue on products that we can tell whether the drug works for them or not, so that they can also be able to benefit from the results at the time they are read out initially, instead of waiting for further studies to look at how safe the drug is on the baby, on the mother, and so on. So with Purpose 1, we have set a stage. All the studies that are following for PrEP, for vaccines, pregnant women will be able to be in the studies and to contribute to the data and be able to benefit from the results at the same time as everyone else. So when we talk about community activism, it is real, and they're doing a very important job, and they have changed science through their voices. And we want them also to change access and be able to advocate for communities to be able to have constant supply of Lenacapavir so that we don't get excited and then later on lose the veins. You should be able to have, because if you inject someone today and then there's no next shot after 6 months and then they get infected, you've lost all, and it's not very cheap. We talk about the $100 there, that's like about 50 per injection. That's a lot of investment by a global fund. We want that continuity in the gains so that we're able to realize the impact of this drug, but we'll not be able to realize if there is shortage. But I'm glad that there's already an access plan by the manufacturer, and also our governments are also working hard with partners to make sure that we have Lenacapavir supplied in the country. At least those who start on it should not stop. You may say someone who is new, there is no drug, but for someone who has started on it, you should be ensured of your drug for as long as you need it. Some people may stop and say, I'm no longer at risk. I was a sex worker, now I got someone to marry me, or I was in a relationship that was not stable, but now I'm in a stable relationship. I don't need it. PrEP is not for your life, like ARVs. PrEP is for the time when you feel you are at risk. But as long as you are at risk, someone should be able to access Lenacapavir, especially if you started on it. You should be assured of continuity.
If I'm on this drug for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, what are the long-term effects of it? Have you seen some of them? Are you studying to see whether you discover some of long-term effects? What's going to happen?
That's an important question. If someone is on Lenacapavir for a long time, is it still safe? Yes, so we conducted the study for women and for men in parallel. When we got results, we continued to follow them up, because before we were testing Lenacapavir, but there's also another drug we're comparing with, which is the current oral PrEP, the Truvada. So what we did is we rolled over everyone to Lenacapavir, which is called now the open label extension phase. So everyone who was in the study, those 5,000 girls, unless if they got infected when they were still in that other blinded phase, and so many men, they're all on Lenacapavir, meaning that we're having data accumulate from 2021 to date. This is 2026. Some people began the injection as early as 2021, and we are following them up. So we continue to monitor safety, but that data is reassuring. We're going to present some data at a meeting in Brazil, the AIDS conference 2026. And I will not preempt the presentation, but the data are reassuring that Lenacapavir is safe. And importantly, when a drug has been licensed and is rolled out, we have pharmacovigilance teams, like National Drug Authority, in the different countries, should be able to monitor and look for the surveillance for anything that may come up. We conducted a study in about 8,000 individuals in total. Right now, it's going to be accessed by millions. So your question is pertinent. Should one side effect come up later that we have not seen earlier, it can be caught through pharmacovigilance by the different authorities. So, but reassuringly, we are continuing to follow up these men and young girls in the purpose trials, and we continue to collect data on safety to be able to complement what we got earlier on when we were doing the blinded trial, the randomized clinical trial. So it's an obligation of the sponsor, investigators, and regulatory authorities in the countries like National Drug Authority to continue monitoring. But so far, the data is reassuring. And also, like I said, this drug is already used for treatment. People who have been on that treatment for a long time, Lenacapavir in the US and other countries. And again, there are no concerns about the safety of that drug. But it's a very good question that there should be pertinent surveillance for any drug. If it's Panadol and you get this side effect, as a health worker, someone reports, you're obliged to inform National Drug Authority that they can look out for that side effects in more people and then confirm whether it is due to that drug or it's coincidence and so on. But that surveillance occurring after years. Remember, there's a drug there, I forget the actual name, but it was in the US, and then it was for a different indication, but later on they realized that it was causing some other effects long term. So that vigilance continues beyond the clinical trials, ensure that drugs are safe and readiness plans are in place by the different regulators. National Drug Authority, and then they have a whole department for pharmacovigilance. Not for Lenacapavir, because they are not concerned, but for every drug, they have pharmacovigilance teams to look out for different side effects that may occur even after the study. The the SUSAs, the suspected and the unexpected events that could occur after the study has ended. Yeah.
So, doctor, we know that there are people with pre-existing health conditions, and sometimes we find people with different conditions. Are there people or categories that may be are there people or categories that may not be allowed to take Lenacapavir because of their existing health condition, and what are those people?
When we do the clinical trials, for someone to take part, like in the Lenacapavir study, Purpose 1 or 2, you have to be one of the most healthy citizens in that country. In Uganda, in South Africa, in those other countries where Purpose 2 was conducted. Why? Because should you have a coexisting condition and then that condition becomes worse in the study, we cannot tell or is seen when you are in the study. There's one study we conducted here. It was for the vaginal the other lady in that study. She had a congenital anomaly that did not manifest before the study. She was about 30 years and she was normal. Within the study, the condition presented. It took us a lot of time to figure out what was happening, but it was neurofibrosis in her brain. Later on, she was operated and then it was okay. What helped her was she had in the study and were able to meet the bills because she was very expensive. Those CT scans, that neurosurgeons and so on. But it was congenital, but it came up later on when they were ready, when she was ready in the study. So for studies, what we do, the most obvious conditions that we can screen out. We don't want anyone who has like low hemoglobin, who has hepatitis D, who has abnormal liver function test or liver function test or diabetes. We screen them out. For you to be eligible, we'll do a whole panel of safety tests, and then we leave out. When we say that we have enrolled 5,000 people, we screened like over 8,000, and beyond the 3,000 were not allowed to during the study because of the conditions they had. Then when you get the cream, people who are healthy, by all means, they're the ones you work on. That will assure that whatever we report is because of that drug, not because someone was sick before. So for your question, currently, someone who may not be able to get onto the Lenacapavir would be someone who's on anti-TB medications. If you're using one of the medications called rifampicin, with the way it is metabolized in the liver, and also Lenacapavir is metabolized in the liver. So the drugs affect each other, and they may have suboptimal, less than the protective levels of drugs that you need. And therefore, what we do, someone has to first finish their course of TB drugs before they get to Lenacapavir. But the good news is that not many people who are HIV negative get TB, apart from children. Usually it is people who are living with HIV, and the Lenacapavir is for prevention, so still they will not qualify as Lenacapavir. Yeah, but the guidelines, Ministry of Health launched the guidelines when we were around the 17th of April, last Friday. They stipulate who can get Lenacapavir, who cannot. But on the whole, many people would qualify for Lenacapavir. But the health workers need to screen and know what, especially the medications. There are some other medications I've not talked about, which are contraindicated in Lenacapavir. The people who are on anticonvulsants, either epileptic, and then you take these anticonvulsants, you may not be able to get Lenacapavir again because of the way the drug is metabolized. The anticonvulsants also are metabolized the same one, and then you have subject to more drug levels, and you may not be protected. Therefore, we do not date in those people. Anticonvulsants, some of them, not all, anti-TB, rifampicin in particular, and there's a list of a few other drugs which are not commonly used good enough. Because if it was like a Coartem or amoxicillin, that would be a problem because you all take those drugs at one point. But good enough, there are those rare drugs, and you have a list, not so long, but we have a list that we avail to the health workers, and they're able not to mix registered drugs because they're contraindicated. Yeah.
So, Doctor, the other question is, people have been asking about, does this if I take this drug, does it in one way or another require me to alter my daily, daily, does it have impact on the food I take and other things? What could be, what's your advice on that?
No, now the beauty with Lenacapavir, again, it has no relationship with meals. You know, like most drugs, they say, take the drug after eating something, or take on an empty stomach, or take when you're going to sleep. Or for Lenacapavir, it has no relationship with meals. So you can eat anything, you can eat anytime before you come for the injection, after the injection. There are no regulations about that. So it has very few restrictions because we know that it's going to benefit many people. It's not going to have a gap that is so restricted and you need it in populations of people. So many people can benefit without any restrictions, but again, health workers are able to give those messages when they're giving out that drug.
The other question, doctor, is this drug protects a person against HIV/AIDS, but we know that there are other STI, sexually transmitted diseases. Does it protect people who have gotten it from other STI? What will happen to that?
Slightly back to the drugs. In the studies, we screened up who had hepatitis B and those who had no protection, because we can tell that you have no protection if you have no antibodies. So we were able to vaccinate them. So again, because the oral PrEP that we have, tenofovir, works against hepatitis B, but Lenacapavir does not. So we emphasize that someone should know their hepatitis B status. If you are hepatitis B surface antigen positive and you have no antibodies, or if you are susceptible to hepatitis B, get vaccinated. Even if you have vaccinated before, get vaccinated, because it doesn't stop you from getting it. In a couple of you can get it, but we don't want you to get hepatitis B in the course of your daily life. But for PrEP, the advantage, the oral PrEP, the tablets also are active against hepatitis B. So we are not very concerned because there's people engaging in risky behaviors, hepatitis B, then STD as well, and then you can get hepatitis B in that process. So I encourage people to test. If you have the protection, the immune response already in your system, no need. But if you don't, then you need to get vaccinated against hepatitis B. So hepatitis B was introduced in the country in 2002. So people who are born before 2002 definitely need to be vaccinated against hepatitis B before they be vaccinated, especially in the endemic areas like northern Uganda, like western Uganda, and so on. Yeah. So then for the sexually transmitted infections, so you can still get the infections whether you take Lenacapavir or not. It is not what they call multi-prevention technology, what scientists are now looking at. Can we have an intervention that can protect one against HIV, against pregnancy, and against other STIs? Because HIV is an STI. We are not yet there, but it's in the pipeline. So that when you are exposed, because some are exposed to all, you find someone, because when we go to communities to screen for participants or research the community for eligibility for the trial, you find someone didn't know. You bring her in, a young girl, 20 years or 18. She has HIV, she didn't know. She's pregnant, she didn't know. She has gonorrhea, chlamydia, she has syphilis, she has herpes simplex. Everything is in that young girl. So if we have multi-prevention technologies, she just needs one intervention and then she's protected. But back to your question, there's no available PrEP regimen because you have the oral PrEP, which is Truvada, we have the dapivirine ring, we have cabotegravir that is given 2 monthly, it's an injection. We have Lenacapavir 6 monthly. None of them has any anti-STI properties. You do not get protected from STIs because you are on PrEP. So we want people to, again, be careful. Like we said, like the Minister of Health said at the launch, you don't need to engage in sexual behaviors that are risky. If you can, because what you're bringing out now is you're going to say I'm protected against HIV. You are a young girl. You are 18. you start with Lenacapavir and or PrEP or cabotegravir that people use, then years later you want to give birth. But because you had so many STIs, especially there's chlamydia. Chlamydia is asymptomatic. In Uganda, we don't test for one STI. Apart from syphilis, we don't have the capacity to tell someone that you have gonorrhea, like objectively, or you have chlamydia, or you have trichomonas vaginalis, because we don't have the resources. The tests are quite expensive, like $65. That's a lot of money. We do that in research. We can be able to say this girl has chlamydia and we treat chlamydia alone. In Uganda, when one has an STI, we treat syndromically. So we give you all the possible drugs to treat the possible infection. It's a cocktail of drugs. So we treat syndromically. We are like, if you have gonorrhea, you can also have chlamydia. You can also have trichomonas. So we give you a cocktail of medications. Because you have a symptom, you have a vaginal discharge, you have abdominal pain, we are suspecting you have an STI. If you have chlamydia alone, should you be unfortunate and then you have chlamydia, it is asymptomatic, you'll not be treated. And yes, it is one of the biggest factors that lead to infertility. You are going to have your body fight against the chlamydia itself. It may not be cured, it may turn into a pelvic inflammatory disease, or you may fight against it, you may be cured even of chlamydia, but it leaves scars. You're going to have scars in your uterus, you're going to have your fallopian tubes blocked, you're going to look for a child, and you may not get that child. Many of them have a history of, I got pregnant one time with an ectopic, they operated me, and then I never had a child again. So the ectopic, it means the baby has implanted, the zygote, the initial form of the baby has implanted in maybe the ovaries or fallopian tubes, because the tubes are so small, the sperm can go through the tube to meet the ovum. But once it is fertilized, the ovum is big now, the zygote should be, it may not be able to pass through that narrow tube now because it has scars. So it cannot pass back to implant in the uterus where the child should grow from. So you end up like the baby bringing the tube, definitely the tube will burst. That's what they call a ectopic. The baby's in the wrong place. So always a history. Many times that I had an ectopic pregnancy, and then after that I look for a child, I cannot get a child. We are forgetting that. We are so active in that time, and you have an unprotected sex, and then you get oral infections, especially chlamydia, and then you're not able to get a child after that. So we are advising and we are requesting before that Lenacapavir is here. That doesn't mean that because you're going to have unprotected sex, it will protect you from HIV, but the STIs, the hepatitis B, the chlamydia, the gonorrhea, they are still real. The herpes simplex, especially type 2 that affects down there, it is still real, and it has implications, especially for women, on your reproductive potential later on. Even for men, we've seen men who come, and they are dancing and they have blocked urethra. They are not medical, but you've seen when you are an internal student, those men come in the emergency ward and someone is jumping around because they have the urge to pass by urine, but the urine cannot pass, which is those infections, especially gonorrhea, that is blocking the tubes, the urethra. Because for you men, you have one tube, only like the urine passes through and the sperms go through. So if it's blocked, and then someone cannot pass the urine, and you see them dancing until you pass a needle, and you leave them and be thank you, they are sweating, those are STIs. So we don't want STIs to go up again because we have brought PrEP. So once we are giving out messages that use Lenacapavir only if you cannot be able to use condoms. But the best, because actually condoms are multi-purpose technology, because they have been protected against HIV, they protect you against STIs, including hepatitis B and pregnancy. So use condoms if you can. Only if you can't, that's when you use PrEP. We've had some wise sex workers, when you're recruiting for these studies, we tell them that we want you to for some studies, you're required to use family planning. Then the lady will tell you, the young girl, I will not join your study because if I use family planning, I will not be worried about pregnancy. So I'm not worried about pregnancy, I will not use a condom. If I don't use a condom, I will get pregnant and I get STIs. They are very, actually not all sex workers you are at risk. People think you are a sex worker, but you are very wise. So that sex worker has low risk of HIV than a woman who is at home and hardly moving around. That's why I said that we say sex workers, or we say these categories, yeah, the obvious ones, but when you dig deep into someone's life, then you can find that someone has higher risk than someone who is a sex worker. I've seen people, we had a meeting recently, and a colleague authorized me to share her story. We were in Gaza together for 6 years. She studied law but didn't practice because the husband was very rich when they were he's still very rich, but they had separated because when she was pregnant the first time, she discovered he had another family, and she had grown up in a family, a monogamous family. We had no steps, perfect family. She never knew that those things happen. So she was in culture shock. So her reaction is to leave the marriage. But she had not practiced her law. She didn't have an income. So she went back to the parents' place with her children. The gentleman is very, very rich, and one of the high top people in government. So she goes back home, but he can provide the school fees, but realized that the children are missing their father and decided to go back to the marriage. She's the wedded wife, the wedded person. They are second wife, but they can only one wife. The other is a woman, is another woman, and not wife. So she's the wife. So she goes back to the husband, but realized that it still hadn't changed. He didn't only have a second family, but many other. Because now the money is even more. When there's money and women, you know what happens. So she approached me. I told her we have, before Aline was approved, I told her we have oral prep. Many people, by the way, not even aware. You can imagine, lawyer, empowered, but she didn't know there was oral prep. I thought there was something you can take every day to protect you from, because the gentleman, the husband, refused to use condoms. So she was worried. Now I'm almost 50 and I get HIV at this level. It will be very embarrassing. So she's like, what can I do? And he didn't want to use condoms. So I showed her this oral prep. I directed her to Mappy. I gave her a number of her colleagues, read the colleague about this center is coming, and she's on oral prep today. 6 years in Gaza, Makerere University law, married to a top official, a politician. She's on prep. So we've not at risk.
Cool, that's something that I have forgotten to ask the drug. If I start and I get 2 injections in 1 year, if I feel like next day I need 2 injections, next day I need 2 injections, it continues like that.
It continues like that.
Okay. Back to the issue of the cost of these drugs. You said you're supposed to get generic drug in a couple by end of next year,
Perhaps.
Yeah, and one of the manufacturers being engaged is the link, and you mentioned that drug would cost like $40.
Yeah.
$40 is still a bit high. Is it, if you bring this drug for $40 on the market for people to buy for themselves, will the most vulnerable meet the cost?
So $40 is for the whole year. So if you divide it into 47 hours oral prep that you take every day, you will take how many tablets in a year? 365 tablets in a year. I'm not sure how much government is able to purchase those drugs at, or whoever, PEPFAR, who have been given as prep. I'm not sure of the cost, but I'm very sure the cost of 365 tablets is much higher than the cost of Lenacapavir, that $40 in a year. So how much is it in a day if you convert $40 in a year to a day? It's how many cents? Very, very little. So $40 may seem high, but I think if you look at first the benefits and also the duration, the whole year, 365 days, that shouldn't be expensive. How much does someone spend in a year if you really value your health? But like we've always had in Uganda, treatment for people who live with HIV and PrEP had been free for most of the individuals, unless if you want to buy. But it should be availed free, unless if someone doesn't want to go to the facility, they're busy and they're able to afford. It could later on, the generics may be available in private facilities, but $40 wouldn't be so high in a whole year. And probably with more, I'm sure with time, more will be given licenses and then the drug can even go lower. You know, we're studying the ARVs. Very, very expensive, but now they are not as expensive. So this is for the beginning, but always as the demand increases and more people get on to a living drug or approved intervention, the manufacturers may reduce the price at scale because now they're able to supply in big numbers. So we will be able to, hopefully, we'll be able to have the price go down even further after that, yeah.
You have already explained how important this drug is forwards in helping in understanding of HIV and how it is before it was transformed into a PrEP. So given that we have it here, and the question that people have been asking me, those researchers have been working for many decades. Why is it that they have not found the drug for HIV/AIDS that's like malaria? I have malaria. I go and buy tablets. I recover from malaria. So people say, why haven't those people been able to find the drug? How important is the Lenacapavir in helping us make advancement toward the discovery of the HIV/AIDS drug?
The cure?
Yes.
Yes, so Lenacapavir does not cure HIV, although, like we mentioned before, it was approved in 2022 by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for treatment of people who are heavily treatment experienced and are resistant to all other forms of ARVs. So the fact that it is as powerful as that, it can suppress HIV that has failed to respond to all other medications, it gives us hope that we are close to finding a cure as well. So if a drug can be able to sort of pick someone from the grave, because if you are resistant to all other ARVs, the next thing is for you. The next thing is you may not be able to recover, so, or you may die. So for this drug, it's giving us hope that with more effective interventions, we can even look at having cure someday. So other drugs are under trial. There are many cure studies now that are looking at drugs that can hit the reservoirs of HIV. You know, HIV, when you take ARVs, we get the drug suppress the viral load, and then you're going to test you, do viral load, and it's undetectable. What most people misinterpret as being cured, especially for in churches, when somebody is told, hey, you are taking the drug so well, you don't even see the virus. It doesn't mean that you're negative, it means that you are taking your drugs well, it is suppressed. But that suppression is within the plasma, but as soon as you stop taking the drug, the virus comes out again from the reservoirs. So there are drugs that scientists or that we are looking at currently that can go and hit the viruses out of the reservoirs, the lymph nodes, the bone marrows, so that the drug is awakened and then it's brought out and it circulates. The virus is awakened, it moves out of the reservoirs, and then the drug can be able to hit it. So studies are ongoing, but there is hope. Not very definite how long it will take. If we can get a protection, which is almost 100% by an intervention like Lenacapavir, there is more hope that what we as scientists are looking at, we shall soon realize the outcome. So studies are ongoing all over the world, looking at cure regimens and where reservoirs can be able to be emptied of the virus, because currently that's where the virus stays, and as soon as you stop taking the drug, it will come out and even in a worse form than before, and people can die or get resistance. So Lenacapavir is a demonstration of that everything is possible, that if a drug can protect someone from HIV 100%, that even cure studies will probably be able to realize the positive outcome very soon. But studies are ongoing in different parts of the world, yeah.
I hope I'll come back and we talk about those studies.
The cure studies.
Yes, yeah. But the last question for me is, you were born in a generation that saw HIV/AIDS. in your family members, so you claimed family members, you treated HIV people, you are talking about, say, people die, sweet soul. But me, you have born in like a lesson of per house, grew up when HIV was not a death sentence anymore.
You were born in the 2000 or?
For 2000.
For 2000.
Yeah.
You were too young to realize.
Yeah, I was too young to realize. But people were born in 2000 and they started, let's say, understanding things in 2010s. I think I belong to that generation. So, what advice do you give to that generation?
Yeah, so they are fortunate, first of all, that they are in an era where when one gets HIV, it's not a death sentence. For us, the time we grew up, I remember I was in P7 when Phil Bongole Lutaya went to Gayaza. I later went to Gayaza, but he had been there the year before. So how he came up, how real it was for people to know that HIV is there. The pictures we saw the time he died, the family members we saw, though initially, in the early 90s, when someone would say that even your relative or your brother's had HIV, you'd even hate them for life. But later realized that, actually, that was HIV in retrospect after seeing how everything evolved. So we've seen the impact. We've seen children, and the picture is very worse for children. You see a child who knew nothing about how this infection is transmitted, and they are in stage 4 of the disease, and then they suffer all the symptoms and pass on. So we've had real examples. We have lived the story. We have witnessed, we have supported, and we have known how terrible this is. But for those who haven't, and just hear the stories, some of them don't even bother to hear the stories, to let them know that HIV is real. You are fortunate that there are drugs now, and also even more fortunate that with their prevention measures, like the PrEP that we have now. But it's always better to stay negative and to be able to not to live, because even if there are drugs, we know people who have not benefited from drugs wouldn't be having people dying of HIV today, but we still have them. We have studies here for advanced HIV, and we have people who come at CD4 below 50, very advanced HIV, and some of them die. So even if the drugs are there, HIV still kills people, and we would want people to stay negative. If you are negative, then you save time. Imagine the time someone takes to go and line up. We have neighbors like MJ Abu Bibi, and it's just so idea having to come all the time. Your life revolves around the facility. Then having to hide those bottles. Some of them say when then the borders, they make a lot of noise. And you've traveled, you have to remember first thing, I have to put pills in my bag. So you are like imprisoned because you have to take those ARVs. If you are already positive, you have to cope with that. But if you are negative, make sure you stay negative, especially the young people. Many of them is because of the money that they engage into those behaviors. But we really advocate for young people to remain negative. Use condoms. If you can't use condoms, we have brought PrEP. We're not saying that you should stay off because there's PrEP, but if you are at risk, then know your risk enough to be able to get the PrEP. Otherwise, HIV is still real, and the cost is high. We are saying it's free, ARVs are free, PrEP is free, but someone is paying. Someone, a taxpayer in the US is paying, someone is paying for intervention, someone is paying the health worker's salary. So it is not entirely free. There's a cost to everything. So if you can have as many people protected, then that's better. But for those who are in school, wait for your time. Those who are married, be faithful. Those who can't, the interventions are there, but it's very important that people remain negative. We need a negative generation, especially a future generation. They don't need to suffer that we have suffered. You spend your whole life researching on HIV, and yet there are so many other diseases. But because there's a lot that we need to put in, someone has to dedicate their time, almost their entire life. My career has been on HIV. My whole career since 2002, 2003. And I got my first job, it had been on HIV. So, and yet there are so many other diseases to think about. Because we needed to prioritize this disease, it was eating our society and communities very fast, and someone had to step up. So for them, we want them to be free of HIV, and we want by 2030 non-infection, and then we can also be able to tackle other health problems. We have many problems currently in the country, but all the resources are going to HIV because of new infections that could be prevented. So young people, we advise that you be faithful or abstain, take all the necessary steps to remain negative, even if it means getting onto the Lenacapavir injection, but stay negative. It will save our country, to save you a lot of resources, the country a lot of resources, and the global community a lot of resources. Because HIV is very expensive. Yeah, emotionally, economically, physically, it's very demanding. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor. It has been a pleasure speaking to you, learning from you, and getting all this information out of it. I hope I'll be coming back again and again, ask you many more questions.
Okay. My other career life, I work on bone health. So we can talk about that at some point, yeah. For who are living with HIV, their comorbidities, how can we improve their quality of life. That's another topic, yeah.